Your home is supposed to be the one place that's completely yours. You lock the door. You know every sound it makes. You know without thinking about it that whatever's inside is only what you put there. The three people in tonight's stories believe that too. Not in the woods, not in some abandoned building. In their own homes. The rooms they knew by heart. The silence they'd heard 1,000 times before. Locks turned. Lights on. Every reason to feel safe. And something was there anyway. I'm Mr. Nocturn. These are true stories, sent to me by the people who lived them. After tonight, you might listen to your own house a little differently. This is Mara's story. In her own words, I was working late, past 2 in the morning, a deadline for a client in a different time zone. My desk lamp was the only light on in the apartment. My bedroom door was open behind me, the room beyond it dark. I'd lived alone for 2 years by then, in a one-bedroom on the second floor of a quiet building in southeast Portland, and I'd never once been afraid of the quiet. I liked it. Every sound in that apartment was a sound I'd made myself. I saved my file, stretched, and stood up from my desk. I didn't take a single step before I heard it. Breathing. Coming from my bedroom, not mine. I was holding my breath completely still. This was separate, slow, rhythmic. The specific cadence of someone breathing in sleep or close to it. Coming from inside my bedroom closet. I stood at my desk for a long time without moving. I told myself what anyone would. The building settling. The HVAC. Sound traveling from a neighbor's apartment in some way I'd never noticed before. I'd been staring at a screen for 6 hours. My brain was finding patterns in noise the way a tired brain does. I stood there and listened, and the breathing kept going. Slow. In. Out. In. Out. Completely regular. Completely human. I reached for my phone without taking my eyes off the bedroom doorway and texted my downstairs neighbor, Helen, a retired teacher who'd given me her number the week I moved in for exactly this kind of situation. I didn't call. I didn't want to make a sound. I typed, "Something is wrong, please call 911 and come upstairs." I sent it, then stood at my desk and waited, listening to the breathing, not moving. Helen called the police. 2 officers arrived 11 minutes later. I let them in through the front door, dead bolted, chains still on, and stood in the living room while they cleared the apartment. They opened the closet. Empty. Clothes on hangers. Shoes on the floor. A box of winter things on the shelf. Nothing else. They checked the windows, locked from the inside. Under the bed. The bathroom, the kitchen. Nothing. One of the officers said it was probably the ductwork. Sound carries strangely through HVAC systems late at night, when everything else goes quiet. He'd seen it before, he said. I thanked them and locked the door behind them. I sat on the couch and thought about what he'd said, honestly and carefully. Then I went back to the closet and opened it myself. I pushed the hanging clothes aside. On the back wall, the wall that shared a surface with the outside of the building, 2 floors above a parking lot, there were marks I hadn't noticed before, scratches, low near the floor, the kind fingernails leave working repeatedly at painted drywall. Not fresh, the paint around them had yellowed. But deliberate. Made from inside the closet. I stood there looking at those marks for a long time. Then I looked down at my shoes, arranged the way I always kept them, toes out, pairs together. Except one pair, a set of dark flats I wore to client meetings, was turned the wrong way, toes toward the back wall. The way shoes face when someone has just stepped out of them. I called my mother that night. I didn't sleep. In the morning, I called my building manager and asked who'd lived in my unit before me, whether there'd been any incidents. He was quiet for a moment. Then he told me the previous tenant had broken their lease 8 months before I moved in. Left without notice, without the deposit, without an explanation. They'd left some things behind, boxed up in storage. One of those things was a spare key. It had never been recovered. I moved out within the month. I've never fully explained the breathing, and I've thought about it enough to know I never will. But the shoes are the part I can't get past. I know how I left them. I'd worn those flats 2 days before that night and put them away myself, facing out the way I always do. Something turned them around, something that was standing in my closet, in my own shoes facing the back wall, while I sat 10 feet away and worked until 2 in the morning. I think about how long it must have been standing there, how many nights waiting for something. I'm very glad I never found out what. Mara's story was about something already inside, already in a space she thought was entirely hers. Our second story is different. Joel is 32, a high school history teacher from Raleigh, North Carolina. He'd agreed to house sit for his sister for 3 weeks while she was abroad. A house he didn't know well, in a neighborhood he'd never spent a night in. Here's what happened on the second week. This is Joel's story. House sitting for my sister Lauren wasn't a big deal, the ordinary kind of favor that passes between siblings. She'd done it for me twice when I traveled for work. This was me returning it, 3 weeks in her house in North Raleigh, while she did a teaching residency abroad. Feed the cat, bring in the mail, don't let anything go wrong. I'm not an anxious person. I checked the place thoroughly when I arrived. Locks, windows, where she kept the spare flashlight for outages. The first week was completely uneventful. It was the second week that started to feel different, though I couldn't point to anything specific. The house sounded different at night, or maybe I was just more attuned to it by then. The way the heat came through the vents. The oak branch scraping the kitchen window when the wind was out of the east. I told myself it was just unfamiliarity. Any house you don't know sounds louder at night. Thursday of that second week, I went to bed around 11 and was reading when I heard the knock. 3 knocks, measured, deliberate, from the back door off the kitchen, the one that opened onto the small fenced yard. I checked the time. 11:47. I sat up and thought about that backyard, maybe 20 feet deep, fenced on 3 sides with a 6-foot privacy fence. The gate was padlocked. Lauren had shown me specifically, told me the previous owners added it because the yard backed onto an alley and it made her uncomfortable. No way in without a key, no way over either side fence without climbing. I got up. Instead of going straight to the door, I went to the kitchen window above the sink, which looked right out over the yard. Empty. The garden along the left fence, the one outdoor chair, the potted plants. I could see the padlock from there, glinting faintly. Closed. I stood at that window for a long moment, then I walked to the back door, solid wood, no glass, and said, loud enough to be heard through it, "Who's there?" Nothing. I waited 30 seconds, then the knocking came again. Same rhythm, same pace, coming from directly the other side of the door, not the fence, not the yard, the door itself, meaning whoever was knocking was standing on the concrete step I'd just been looking at, the step that had been empty 20 seconds earlier. I stepped back. I'd broken up fights in a school hallway. I don't rattle easily. I went back to that window and pressed my face close to the glass to get the best possible angle on the step. Still empty. No feet, no shadow, nothing. I went back to the door. From the other side, from the step I had just confirmed had nothing on it. 3 more knocks. I called the police. 2 officers came in 9 minutes. One stayed inside with me while the other went around to the alley to check the yard from outside. He confirmed the padlock was secure, climbed the fence anyway, and searched the whole space. Nothing. No footprints on that concrete step, even though dew had settled on every other outdoor surface that night. He stood on the step and knocked 3 times so his partner could compare it to what I'd described. Same knock, same rhythm, same volume, exactly the same. They suggested a loose shutter, maybe a branch catching the house under the right wind. I walked them around back and showed them. The oak was too far away. Every shutter was secured. They were thorough and kind, and they left around 12:40 with no explanation. I sat in Lauren's living room with every light on until sunrise, the cat on my lap. In the morning I called her. I didn't tell her about the knocking. I asked if she'd ever had trouble with the alley gate, whether anyone had gotten into the yard before. She went quiet. Then, did it knock? I didn't answer. It's happened to me twice, she said. Always at night. Always the back door. Always 3 knocks. She told me she'd almost warned me before she left, but figured it had stopped. The first time it happened to her, she opened the door. There was nothing there. She never opened it again. I asked why not, if there was nothing there. Because of what I felt, she said, standing on that step, looking at an empty yard at 1 in the morning. I felt like whatever had been standing there had just stepped to the side, just out of the doorway, like it moved when I opened the door, and was still there. Just not where I could see it. I finished the 3 weeks. I never went near that back door again. Lauren's still in that house. 4 years now. Whatever knocks has never done anything except knock, and she's made her peace with it. I asked her once how she manages to sleep, knowing it might come back. I just don't answer it, she told me. Some things you learn to live alongside. She sounded completely calm saying it. That might be the part I think about most. Mara found evidence of something that had already been inside. Joel heard something knock from a step that was empty every time he looked. Both of them called the police. Both got answers that explain nothing. Our last story tonight is Grace's. She's 47, a branch librarian in Spokane, Washington, alone in the house she's lived in for 11 years. On a Tuesday night in January, her power went out and stayed out for 4 hours. She heard something in that darkness she's never been able to explain. This is Grace's story. I've lived in this house 11 years. I know it completely. Every room, every way the light moves through it at different hours. I raised my 2 kids here. They're grown now. One in Seattle, one finishing college in Missoula. My husband passed 4 years ago, so it's fully mine now. And I've made my peace with the solitude. The slow way you make peace with something you didn't choose. I'm not a fearful person. I want that on the record before anything else. The power went out at 8:14 on a Tuesday evening in January. I know the exact time because I'd been watching something on my laptop which stayed on battery, and the timestamp was right there when the room went dark around it. Outside, snow was coming down the heavy, windless way it does in Spokane in January, thick enough to muffle everything, including the streetlights. I found my candles without any trouble. I know where everything in this house is. I lit 3 in the living room, 1 in the kitchen, called the power company's outage line, and got an automated voice telling me the restoration time was unknown. I settled in, read by candlelight for an hour, which I don't mind. I've done it before during other outages, and there's something calming about the reduced world of a flame. Everything past it, soft and indistinct. Around 9:20, I got up to refill my tea, and I was standing at the counter, kettle in hand, when I heard my name. Spoken once, clearly, in my own voice. Not similar to mine, not close to mine, mine. My pitch, my cadence, the exact way I say my own name, which I've heard back on voicemails often enough to know precisely, coming from the dark hallway that leads to the bedrooms. I set the kettle down very carefully and stood completely still, listening with everything I had. The house was silent, the snow outside swallowing whatever street noise there usually is. No candlelight reached the hallway at all. I waited 2 or 3 minutes, long enough for the rational part of my brain to start working. Auditory hallucination, the tricks, isolation and candlelight and a quiet house. Play on a mind that's tuned to find its own name in ambiguous sound. I've read about it. I know it's real and documented. I picked up my candle, walked to the hallway, and held the light up. Empty. 4 closed doors. My room, the bathroom, my daughter's old room, my son's. All shut the way I always keep them. Carpet undisturbed. I went back to the kitchen, poured my tea, and it almost steadied myself when I heard it again. Same voice, same single clear word, same hallway. I put the mug down. What I did next, I'm still not sure I can explain. I didn't call out. I didn't go back to the hallway or reach for my phone. I sat down at the kitchen table, folded my hands, and said, quietly, into the dark house, I hear you. I don't know what you are, but I hear you. Then I waited. Nothing answered. I sat at that table for 2 hours, until the power came back at 12:09 and flooded the house with light. I checked every room, every closet, under every bed, every window locked, every door secure. Nothing that wasn't supposed to be there. I slept that night, which surprised me. I went to bed with the lights on, exhausted, and whatever I'd heard hadn't come any closer. It called my name once and stopped, and sitting down instead of running had felt like the right thing to do at the time. And it still does, months later. The power's gone out twice more since then, both times in winter storms. Nothing has happened either time. I've thought a great deal about what I heard that night. I've gone through every rational explanation, and haven't been able to dismiss all of them. And I haven't been able to fully accept any of them either. What I keep coming back to is this. It was my voice, not a voice like mine, my voice. The only way I can make sense of that is to think whatever spoke used the one voice it knew I'd stop and listen to, which means it had been paying attention to me for long enough to know exactly which one that was. 11 years is a long time to be listened to. I try not to think too hard about what it was waiting for me to hear. 3 homes. 3 people who were alone in spaces that were entirely theirs. 3 encounters with something that shouldn't have been there. Mara found shoes turned the wrong way in a closet and scratches on a wall left by something that had been standing there long enough to leave a mark. Joel heard 3 knocks from a step that was empty every time he looked, and learned his sister had made her own peace with the same sound years earlier. Grace heard her own name in her own voice from a hallway that had nothing in it, and has spent months wondering how long she'd been listened to. None of them ran. Mara sat on her couch until sunrise. Joel stayed the full 3 weeks. Grace sat down at her kitchen table and said out loud that she'd heard it. I don't know if that's courage or something closer to stubbornness, but all 3 of them are still here, and whatever was in those homes with them is, as far as any of them know, still there too. If something's happened in your own home, a sound with no source, a presence you couldn't explain, anything that made you question whether you were really alone, send it to me. Links in the description. I'm Mr. Nocturn. New stories every week. Subscribe if you're ready for more. Tonight, before you sleep, listen to your house. Really listen. And ask yourself if everything you hear is something you put there. One more thing before we close tonight, of everything sent to me since I started this channel. Camping encounters, abandoned buildings, night shift stories, highway sightings, the Home Alone stories sit with me differently. Not because they're scarier, because of what they take. A campsite, an abandoned building, a night shift. Those are places with edges. You enter, you leave, and when something happens there, the fear stays behind with the place. You can put distance between it and you. Your home doesn't work that way. It's the place you carry with you everywhere else. The baseline of safety that makes the rest of your life bearable. The one place you get to be completely, unguardedly yourself. Mara lost that. She moved out of an apartment she loved because something had been sharing it with her. Joel went home to his own place afterward and started checking his closets before bed, weeks after it was over. Grace is still in her house, 11 years and counting, still listening to it at night. I think Grace might be the bravest of the 3. Not for staying, but for sitting down at that table in the dark and saying, I hear you. For refusing to pretend she hadn't, and staying anyway. Whatever's in our space is with us. Whatever we can't explain, can't prove, can't fully make sense of. We don't always have to run from it. Sometimes we can sit down, say we hear it, and stay anyway. I'm Mr. Nocturn. New stories every single week. Subscribe if you're ready for more. Good night.